Distinguished delegates, before we continue with the consideration of issues allocated to the high-level segment, I should like to inform the distinguished delegates of the decision taken by the Bureau at its first meeting at 2 p.m. today. It is just to announce that the Committee of the Whole starts its work just now in the conference room number 1. The drafting committee will start its work at 4 o'clock today in the meeting room 9. Please recognize the change comparing to the first announcement. It means at 4 o'clock in room 9. Let me to announce that we have to be very efficient in our work because we have interpretation service only for 3 hours now, since 3 up to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and let me to thank to interpreters for a very good service and understanding during the morning session. Now we shall continue with the consideration of the issues which were allocated to the high-level segment, namely activities of the United Nations Human Settlements Programme, UN Habitat, progress report of the Executive Directory, agenda item 5, and dialogue on the special theme for the 25th session of the Governing Council, agenda item 6, work program of UN Habitat for the biennium 2016-2017, and budget of the United Nations Habitat and Human Settlement Foundation for the 2016-2017 biennium, agenda item 7. The introduction of these 3 agenda items was made by the Executive Director in his statement of this morning, and therefore it is now my great pleasure, distinguished delegates, to give the floor as we have agreed during the morning session, that we will start with statements by regional and political groups, followed by the ministers of individual countries. Let me to announce that for those who will give the presentation on behalf of the groups, they have 7 minutes allocated for the presentation, and for individual countries it will be 5 minutes. Please take note on the counter to be really efficient, as we have a lot of speakers on the list, and we have limited time until 6 o'clock. Let me now ask Egypt, does it would like to take the floor on behalf of the G77 and China? Yes, you have
Mr. Chairman, Excellency Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure and honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. And I would like to start the statement by expressing our deepest heartfelt condolences to the Kenyan competent authorities and the families of the victims of Garissa, those youngsters who had nothing in their young hearts except love and hope for a better future for themselves, their families, and their countries. May Almighty God solicit their souls and make them rest in peace, and grant their families patience and solace. At the outset, I wish to welcome the report of the Executive Director on the implementation of the work program of the United Nations Programme for Human Settlements. We also commend the programme's efforts in advancing the implementation of the outcomes of the Governing Council at its previous sessions. Mr. Chairman, the Group of 77 and China emphasizes the management of sustainable cities, and human settlements constitutes a major developmental challenge. The recent demographic trends and rapid rates of urbanizations are constantly placing tremendous pressure on cities, especially in developing countries, Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. We also remain concerned about the persistent stark inequalities of the current situation in many developing countries, where we have a high proportion of world population still living in informal settlements, which coexists with modern cities and state-of-the-art urban centers. We recall the outcome of the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio+20, which recognized that well-planned cities can promote economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable societies. Indeed, cities can play an ambivalent role in facing global challenges, for whereas they may seem to replicate and accentuate certain problems, cities also provide a privileged and immediate locus for finding solutions. Sustainable urban planning remains an essential element for enabling cities to play their roles as catalysts of growth and sustainable development. We believe that inequalities remain the greatest challenge for sustainable urban development. In this vein, it's important to promote sustainable development policies that prioritize provision of affordable housing, infrastructure, and slums upgrading. National urban policies should aim at ensuring that the benefit of public investments reach all city dwellers. Urbanization policy should contemplate people-centered approaches based on social inclusion and the right to the city as fundamental principles. Mr. Chairman, it's also critical to adopt integrated approaches to planning and development of sustainable human settlements, aiming at improving the quality of living and working conditions of both urban and rural dwellers, and to enhance the rural-urban linkages, with the aim of poverty eradication, so that all people have access to basic services, housing, and mobility. We underline the importance of considering disaster risk reduction, resilience, and the impact of climate change in urban planning. In that context, we welcome the outcome of the Third World Conference on disaster risk reduction held in Sendai, Japan in March 2015. Mr. Chairman, sustainable urban development and human settlements require transformative policies in a multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approach. In this regard, we call for new modalities of interaction among nations at the international level, as well as between central and local governments at the national level, in order to fulfill the respective roles as governmental stakeholders in global effort on sustainability. Other non-state actors also play important complementary roles. Mr. Chairman, the Group of 77 and China reiterates its support for the report of the Open Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals, which includes a standalone goal on human settlements, Goal 11, to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We believe that having a standalone goal shall contribute decisively to the success of the third conference on housing and sustainable urban development, Habitat 3, of course, which will be the first global conference to take place after the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda. We believe that Goal 11 and its 7 targets shall contribute to our efforts towards the effective management of the challenges of rapid urbanization and provide an opportunity to promote a positive, mutually reinforcing relation between cities and their surroundings across the human settlements continuum. Mr. Chairman, the Group of 77 and China emphasizes, however, that one of the most critical constraints remains the provision of adequate financing. In many developing countries, the capacity of the government is constrained by the low level of revenues. In this regard, we reiterate the need for the developed countries to fulfill their commitments to support developing countries' efforts through the provision of the necessary means of implementation, including resources, capacity building, and technology transfer, as well as the creation of an international enabling environment for sustainable development. Mr. Chairman, while we remain concerned about the financial situation of the UN Habitat, we encourage the UN Executive Director to continue these endeavours for the implementation of the programme's resource mobilisation strategy, as well as the outreach efforts to widen the donor base. We also encourage the Executive Director to advance the ongoing process to increase the overall efficiency and effectiveness of the program activities based on results-based management principles. It's equally important to continue and expand the efforts to raise awareness of the relevance of the work of the program, its unique expertise and its ability to deliver results while highlighting the impact of the government's activities. The Group of 77 and China is set for fruitful engagement during the 25th session of the Governing Council of the UN Habitat, which coincides with the process of intergovernmental negotiations on the post-2015 development agenda. The chosen theme of the Governing Council and its two sub-themes on rural-urban linkages and the contributions of the UN Habitat in the post-2015 development agenda are very important and relevant to the discussions taking place leading to the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda in September this year. Mr. Chairman, to conclude, the Group of 77 and China also commends the efforts exerted in preparation for the 25th session of the Governing Council in order to reach consensus on the UN Habitat governance review process. We hope that the positive dialogue which took place among the various regional groups would eventually lead to the adoption of the necessary measures to strengthen the efficiency, effectiveness, transparency and representation of the UN Habitat and make it more fit for purpose to deliver its mandate in the context of the post-2015 development agenda and ahead of the Habitat 3 conference. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of G77 in China, and at the same time let me to announce small change in presenting those who will make statements on behalf of the groups. We will, with your permission, we will not mention the countries because it's of technical problem. If I mention the individual country, the system opens the time limit only for 5 minutes. Just to avoid this situation, we will just mention the group and then you will get the 7 minutes slot. Thank you very much. Now I would ask Western European and other group if there is somebody taking. I don't think so. Okay, then we can proceed to the African Group of States. Please take the floor. I don't see any. Asia Group of States. Yeah. May I invite Grurak?
Yes.
Yes, please take the floor.
Distinguidos delegados y participantes.
Ya, ahora sí.
Distinguidos delegados y participantes, a nombre del Grupo Regional de América Latina y el Caribe, tengo el honor de dirigirme al 25º Consejo de Administración de ONU Habitat. Señor Presidente, el Grupo Regional de América Latina y el Caribe tiene amplio interés por fortalecer la presencia con un alto impacto de ONU Habitat en nuestros países, frente a los retos que debemos afrontar para lograr la sostenibilidad de los asentamientos humanos con equidad e inclusión social, a través del desarrollo urbano y rural de la región. En este sentido, los países de América Latina y el Caribe esperan contar con un mayor apoyo de ONU Habitat y extendemos una invitación a los demás países para conocer los procesos de urbanización que se están llevando a cabo en nuestra región. Esperamos también que el programa de ONU Habitat salga fortalecido tras las deliberaciones y la toma de decisiones de este Consejo de Administración. Señor Presidente, en GRULAC reiteramos nuestra mejor disposición para el diálogo constructivo con miras a alcanzar los acuerdos necesarios en los temas relevantes para el futuro de ONU Habitat, con el objetivo de lograr un programa más eficiente, efectivo, transparente y con impacto social. El GRULAC reconoce el papel fundamental de ONU Habitat en los trabajos preparatorios de la Conferencia Habitat 3 y en apoyo a la Agenda de Desarrollo posterior a 2015, sin dejar de lado los demás elementos propios de su mandato. Esta gran responsabilidad nos motiva a buscar los caminos para concluir exitosamente las deliberaciones sobre la gobernanza, con base en un largo análisis y una reflexión con el fin de mejorar el marco de rendición de cuentas y seguimiento a la implementación del programa de trabajo y el plan estratégico de ONU Habitat. Es necesario igualmente asegurarnos de que una amplia difusión de la labor de ONU Habitat permita una mejor consideración entre los gobiernos. Consideramos que el asumir los retos de la planificación de los asentamientos humanos es esencial para el desarrollo sostenible y la nueva agenda urbana, teniendo conciencia de que la urbanización puede servir como instrumento para impulsar el desarrollo económico y social de nuestros países, comprendida desde una perspectiva integral en la que los vínculos urbanos-rurales sean fortalecidos y se generen sinergias positivas entre las autoridades nacionales y locales. Reiteramos nuestra disposición para garantizar la formulación de propuestas dirigidas a hacer las ciudades y los asentamientos humanos incluyentes, seguros, resilientes y sostenibles, tal como lo prevé el Objetivo de Desarrollo Sostenible pertinente. Señor Presidente, América Latina y el Caribe ha demostrado con hechos su compromiso, interés y capacidad para contribuir al diálogo global en temas de desarrollo urbano y rural en los asentamientos humanos. Cabe destacar que el 7º Foro Urbano Mundial, realizado hace un año en Medellín, Colombia, ha sido catalogado de manera exitosa y al respecto deseamos saludar la Declaración de Medellín como un importante insumo a tener en cuenta durante las deliberaciones. Asimismo, el GRULAC apoya la celebración con éxito de la siguiente gran cita, es decir, la Conferencia Habitat 3, la cual se realizará en Quito, Ecuador, en octubre del próximo año. La Conferencia Habitat 3 vuelve a ofrecer la oportunidad para escuchar la pluralidad de voces, creando espacios para compartir aciertos y errores, así como el intercambio de experiencias en mejores prácticas. En este contexto, los países de América Latina y el Caribe alentamos a los Estados miembros y a los donantes internacionales y bilaterales a continuar con el apoyo a los preparativos nacionales, regionales y mundiales de la Conferencia Habitat 3, mediante contribuciones voluntarias al Fondo Fiduciario de Habitat 3, con el fin de promover la participación de representantes de los países en desarrollo, tanto en la tercera reunión del Comité Preparatorio como en la propia conferencia. Señor Presidente, el GRULAC desea llamar la atención a la necesidad de que ONU Habitat y otras agencias especializadas de Naciones Unidas redoblen sus esfuerzos para que el hermano pueblo de Haití continúe en el camino de resarcir los enormes daños ocasionados por el terremoto de 2009 que asoló a este país caribeño, tanto en lo económico como en su infraestructura, la vivienda, los sistemas de educación y de salud principalmente. En este sentido, creemos necesario que se tome en cuenta la importancia de considerar como prioridad a los grupos en situación de vulnerabilidad de la sociedad en los proyectos de urbanización, dada la clara tendencia de nuestras sociedades al envejecimiento de sus poblaciones, gracias a los avances de la medicina. Al respecto, destacamos la necesidad de poner atención a la accesibilidad para las personas con discapacidad. Para finalizar, señor presidente, deseo reiterar nuestra disposición de contribuir al éxito de la presente sesión. Consideramos que estamos sentando los fundamentos para capacitar al programa para apoyar a los países a implementar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible pertinentes de la Agenda de Desarrollo posterior a 2015. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico, speaking on the group of GRUAC, and I would also like to appreciate that he was really keeping the time limit. Thank you very much. And now we will continue by the Asian group of states. Please take the floor.
In the name of God, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, at the outset, I would like to express both my pleasure for having participated in the 25th the Governing Council of UN Habitat, as well as my gratitude for the efforts of Mr. John Claus, Executive Director of UN Habitat, and his colleagues as the organizers of this session. I have no doubt that our participation in this session demonstrates our commitment to promote sustainable urban development and human settlements. Needless to say, to be sustainable development has to address the whole continuum of human settlements, both urban and rural. I am confident that the deliberations of Governing Council members and sharing knowledge and information on enhancing urban-rural linkages and harnessing the transformative power of urbanization will have an everlasting impact on our future efforts in line with the post-2015 development agenda. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, today it is clear that housing and settlement development are complex problems with transboundary impacts. The housing sectors have wide-ranging interactions with other economic sectors. This means that urban and rural housing planning require a holistic approach cognizant of the dynamic nature of such interactions. Since the right to adequate housing has been recognized in Article 3, 31, and 43 of the Constitution of Islamic Republic of Iran, and in line with the requirement of the Fourth Five-Year Development Plan, the Parliament has adopted the Law for Management and Support of Housing Production and Supply in 2008. This law establishes a comprehensive framework to provide adequate housing for all income groups in both urban and rural areas. Furthermore, the Ministry of Roads and Urban Development is in the process of elaborating a comprehensive plan for housing, including action plans for diverse aspects of housing problems, such as housing finance, urban land, building materials, housing tax system, construction industry, subsidies, energy efficiency, housing for the low income, social housing, and rural housing. A recent initiative the government has undertaken to enhance the housing finance mechanisms is establishing land and building funds to attract and channel small savings towards housing provision. The government is also developing a secondary mortgage market for housing. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, another challenge affecting balanced urban-rural development is uncontrolled urbanization and urban sprawl. This necessitates effective planning for harmonious development of the whole continuum of settlement from small rural settlement to large metropolitan agglomerations. Urban regeneration and slum upgrading also demand special attention. In Iran, the government has adopted two strategy documents in 2004 and 2014, respectively. These two documents address the need for all upgrading of informal settlements and regeneration of deteriorated fabrics, as well as rehabilitation of rural settlement in the urban periphery. Together, these documents establish a flexible framework for community-based upgrading and promoting public-private partnership in this area. A significant challenge is the growing vulnerability of settlements. This requires an increase in durable housing stock, retrofit of rural housing, as well as promoting pro-poor settlement resilience. In this regard, the Housing Foundation, a semi-non-governmental organization, currently builds durable rural housing or retrofits existing housing stock at a rate of about 200,000 dwellings per year. The Housing Foundation has also assisted our neighboring countries in their post-disaster reconstruction efforts. Another challenge in our region is the growing vulnerability of settlements. This requires an increase in durable housing stock, retrofit of rural housing, and urban regeneration, as well as promoting pro-poor urban resilience. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that the forthcoming Habitat 3 process provides an exceptional opportunity to enhance our approaches to development in a new urban agenda. I would like to invite other countries to vigorously participate and support in this process. Allow me to finish by expressing my sincere hopes that these efforts will be instrumental in promoting consistent growth, encouraging sustainable development, and creating prosperous settlements. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for the presentation of Asia Pacific Group, and also my apologies for announcing not the full name of the group. Now we will continue by the statement of European Union. Please take the floor.
Mr. President, distinguished ministers and delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states for this 25th Governing Council of UN Habitat. The European Union and its member states express their deepest condolences to the families of the victims and those injured in the terrorist attack in Garissa. The EU High Representative and Vice President Federica Mogherini made a statement to this regard in which she reiterated the EU commitment to supporting the government and the people of Kenya in overcoming the threat from the terrorism. I wish to congratulate you, Professor Jan Ilavsky, on your election as President of this Governing Council. I would like to also thank UN Habitat for hosting this 25th Governing Council meeting back-to-back with the second PrepCom of the third United Nations Conference on Human Settlements to be held in Quito in 2016. By the middle of the 21st century, it is estimated that 70% of the world population will live in urban areas. The proportions between rural and urban populations have therefore dramatically evolved over the last 60 years. Over the next 20 years, the fastest growing urban areas will be in Asia and Africa. Urban slums still host a third of the urban population in this context of unprecedented urbanization. This situation and this prospect impose upon us all immense responsibilities, but also present major and hopeful opportunities. Our meetings these days in Nairobi take place in the context of a year 2015, during which major UN conferences will shape and influence the discussion around the future global urban agenda and Habitat 3 more generally. They should result in an ambitious agenda, which leaves no one behind, with all countries and stakeholders playing their full part. Without preempting the outcomes of those processes, the EU and its member states realize the critical momentum around urban issues and challenges. In this context, the EU believes the future global urban agenda should address both the challenges and opportunities raised by urban development. The EU believes it should be focused and result-oriented. It should be a truly global and transformative agenda that brings together in a balanced fashion all three pillars of sustainable development. Our approach is guided by the vision of well-managed, sustainable and livable cities. The European Union and its member states welcome the special theme of this biannual Governing Council session, the contribution of UN Habitat to the post-2015 development agenda, promoting sustainable urban development and human settlements, as well as its two sub-themes. Sustainable development does not stop at the limits of cities, no matter their size. The European Union and its member states see the reality of rural-urban linkages through the existing urban-rural continuum and the urban-rural complementarity of functions and flows of people, culture, capital, goods, services, employment, information and technology. We are of the view that well-managed urban-rural partnership can ensure a high degree of self-sustainability of metropolitan areas, can limit urban sprawl and prevent rural depopulation. We stress the mutually reinforcing rural-urban linkages when addressing food security challenges, and we strongly support the role of local authorities. Without taking away our attention from specific urbanization-related targets, the new urban agenda should address urban-rural linkages. Regarding the second sub-theme, the European Union and its member states recognize the role UN Habitat played so far in providing expertise and inputs to the discussions around the post-2015 development agenda. While we are confident that urban-related issues will figure prominently in the new global development agenda, it is important not to preempt September discussions in New York. We are convinced that it is crucial for all of us to make sure that UN Habitat is fit for purpose in order to respond more efficiently to future challenges. The European Union and its member states strongly believe that the governance structures of UN Habitat require fundamental change to ensure a more efficient and functioning relationship between the Secretariat and the membership. Strengthened and conscious intersessional oversight should be a key priority while minimizing additional cost and avoiding supplementary bureaucracy layers. We stand ready to engage actively on this issue during the present Governing Council discussions on the reform resolution. To conclude, Mr. Chair, I would like to express the appreciation of the European Union and its member states to the preparatory work carried out by the Executive Director, Dr. John Close, and his team for the Governing Council. We could also like to thank the Committee of Permanent Representatives for its preparatory work. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union for the statement. I now call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of the Republic of India, Dr. Mrs. Nanjita Chatterjee, Secretary in the government of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation of the Government of India. Please take the floor.
Excellencies, dignitaries and delegates, on behalf of India, I would like to thank the UN Habitat for this opportunity to share our views on the theme of promoting sustainable urban development and human settlements, with a special focus on enhancing urban-rural linkages across the continuum of human settlements to harness the transformative power of urbanization for sustainable development. Excellencies, India is in transition from rural to an urban society. With a total of 7,935 cities and towns, India is one among the largest urban systems in the world. About 377 million people reside in urban areas, which form 31.16% of the total population. There's an increasing concentration of people in cities. 53 million plus cities accommodate about 43% of the urban population, and 468 1 lakh plus cities accommodate about 70% of the urban population. Attracted by improved living standards, livelihood opportunities, access to high level of infrastructure facilities, economies of scale and scope, and greater opportunities for networking, the magnet of urban areas continue to draw migrants from rural areas. About 37% of the urban addition during the decade 2001 to 2011 has been due to migration from rural areas. While urbanization is attributed to a high level of productivity and economic growth, it also results in adverse spatial implications, and these need to be addressed to sustain the positive gains. The ability of the cities to cope with the unabated influx is limited, and this results in proliferation of informal settlements within the city. Affordability issues within urban areas results in spatial sprawl, often in an unregulated and unplanned manner in the peripheral areas of cities and towns. In the context of the significant economic and social role being played by the urban areas, the proposed inclusion of 11th goal of making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable in the Sustainable Development Goals is indeed of critical importance. It is also important that the rural and urban areas are perceived as part of a human settlement system and to recognize the fact that their sustainable development is incumbent on their integrated development. India is according significant priority for the housing and urban development sector. Towards addressing this basic necessity for ensuring sustainable development, we have a national urban housing and habitat policy which has underscored the objective to promote sustainable development of habitat and to realize the goal for affordable housing for all. It is well recognized that the more rapidly a country economically grows, the faster it urbanizes. As per the estimates of UN Habitat 2009, urban areas account for as much as 70% of the GDP in East Asia. Urban settlements in India also to play a very critical role in economic development, accommodating one of the largest urban systems in the world. A substantial part of India's GDP is contributed by the urban areas, which forms about 63% of our GDP in 2007 and is likely to increase to 75% in 2021. By 2050, half the Indian population is likely to live in the urban areas. There is hence a clear recognition that migration to urban areas is inevitable in view of improved labor productivity and earning for migrants, as well as in cities' requirement of cheaper labor. In this context, it is necessary to identify methods and processes to make the urban migration work much better for mutual advantage. India is fully seized of the imperative of urban upliftment to improving quality of public transport, providing drainage, sanitation, waste management, water recycling, provision of facilities in public and commercial areas. There's a commitment to adopt modern scientific methods of town and country planning practices based on geographical information system in urban development. Extension of metro services to important and major urban centers, development of twin cities, creating infrastructure in satellite cities are other priority areas to promote sustainable and integrated development of urban settlement system. It is in this context that India is according topmost priority to set up 100 new smart and safe cities in the country. This entire effort will be people-centric and proactive urban reforms, planning and management, as well as citizens' participation would be the hallmark of this strategy. towards ensuring that all citizens of cities contribute in its growth and share the fruits of development. Special programs with the appropriate inbuilt provisions are being conceived to address infrastructure requirements of cities and towns. Consideration of urban and rural areas as part of considered human settlement planning is an imperative in sustainable development. There is a necessity to encourage a strategy which would facilitate a mutually complementary and beneficial development of rural and urban areas. This is particularly relevant in the context of rapid urbanization process and improved transportation systems. A special program of the Urban Mission is under formulation, which will enable availability of higher order quality infrastructure in rural areas, which will go a long way in promoting sustainable development of urban and rural areas as a continuum rather than independent identities. As the lead country of the Working Group of Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Housing and Urban Development, India has been leading the urban and rural planning and management pillar. India has organized an international meet on the theme. Number of recommendations on appropriate planning has been specially highlighted. Focus has been made on urban-rural continuum as an imperative of integrated planned development, and this has been well recognized in this group. As a country in rapid transition from rural to urban society and economy, India would continue its efforts towards forging a healthy and symbiotic relationship between rural and urban settlements, thereby enabling the entire settlement system to evolve in a harmony, mutually complementary, as well as reinforcing for improving the quality of life for citizens at large. On behalf of India, I once again thank the UN Habitat for this opportunity to share our experience and our views on the theme of promoting sustainable urban development and human settlements, with a special focus on enhancing urban-rural linkages across the continuum of human settlements to harness the transformative power of urbanization for sustainable development during this 25th session of the Governing Council. Once again, Excellencies, a big thank you on behalf of India.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of India, and as the Vice Chair of the Governing Council has just finished her presentation, just let me to announce that the drafting committee will start its work at 4 o'clock in room number 9. Thank you very much. Thanks. I now call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of Malaysia, Honorable Datuk Abdul Rahman Dahlan, Minister of Urban Wellbeing, Housing and Local Government of Malaysia. Please, Minister, take the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President and distinguished members of the Governing Council. First and foremost, on behalf of the Ministry of Urban Wellbeing, Housing and Local Government of Malaysia, I would like to extend my heartiest congratulations on the convening of the 25th Governing Council session of UN Habitat. It is a great honor to be able to participate in the opening of this council today. Malaysia has always been cooperating closely with UN Habitat, particularly in addressing various human settlement issues in Asia and the Pacific region. This is even more so now that we are working together towards the 9th World Urban Forum, where Malaysia will be hosting this eminent event, which marks a new dimension in the relationship between the government of Malaysia and UN Habitat. The theme enhancing urban-rural linkages across the continuum of human settlements to harness the transformative power of urbanization for sustainable development reflects one of the main concerns that Malaysia has been focusing on. Malaysia has been pursuing a strategy of balanced growth between regions and between urban and rural areas. Malaysia has also been pursuing higher quality of life for all citizens, and this would continue to be a priority for the government to make Malaysia a better place to live, work and play. Over the past decade, Malaysia has experienced a trend of rapid urbanization, the population in urban areas is growing at a rate of 2.2%, while rural population is experiencing a lower growth rate of 1.6% in the period from 2000 to 2009. This trend is expected to continue as the nation develops. However, land use planning would opt for a precautionary approach in managing rapid urban growth. It is important that the concentration of growth in urban areas will not come at the expense of rural development. Across both rural and urban settings, the government will continue to provide fundamental building blocks for higher quality of life in terms of healthcare, education, security, communications, technologies, and transportation. Resilience of urban and rural areas are also a focus. As we all know, urban and rural areas face different challenges as they are often economically and socially divided. Nevertheless, they are symbiotic in nature, with rural providing input into the economic activity of cities, and rural areas often become safety nets for the urban poor. Cities also function as important gateways for rural communities, and rural economies can only succeed if the economic and physical infrastructures between rural areas and their city gateways are strong. Rural areas will benefit from urban agglomeration when there is strong economic integration between urban and rural activities. Logistical services would also be provided to adjacent rural areas, enabling the integration of these areas into local or international supply chains. Balanced development across the country will foster equitable growth, investment, and employment opportunities for all. Inclusive development from the geographical perspective implies addressing inter as well as intra-imbalances in the region, cities, and neighborhood levels, as well as between urban and rural areas. Improving the growth potential in lagging regions is particularly necessary to bridge the prosperity gap between regions in the country. Developing roads, rail, and port infrastructure would help to attract mobile industries to lagging rural regions. The focus of movement shall not only focus on freight movements, but also the movements of people. Thus, the role of public transport to support the urban-rural continuum is key. Coupled with increasing personal skills among the rural workforce, establishing urban-rural linkages is necessary, providing rural dwellers with adequate non-farm job opportunities, higher income, enhanced quality of living, and better social facilities. It is also necessary to create activities and lifestyles in the rural area to bring back youth into the rural areas, youth who are also connected to the urban area. The role of technology also in this aspect should not be undermined, and the role of technology to improve the connectedness of urban and rural area should be key. All these aspects are being incorporated in Malaysia's national rural policy, and our national urban policy is also reviewed to be in tandem with rural opportunities. Indeed, we firmly believe on the role of UN Habitat in the post-2015 development agenda, playing a leading role in flagging the innovative solutions to emerging challenges, including that of reducing urban-rural divide and also enhancing urban-rural linkages. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malaysia, and now I call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of South Africa, Honorable Kota Fredericks, Deputy Minister for Human Settlements. Please take the floor.
President of the Governing Council, members of the Bureau, ministers, ambassadors, High Commissioner, Executive Director, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I greet you this afternoon. Mr. President, in respect to the recent cowardly terrorist attack at Garissa University, I would like to use this opportunity to express on behalf of the government and the people of South Africa our sympathy and deepest condolences to the government and the people of Kenya, especially families of the victims. South Africa congratulates you, President, and members of the Bureau on your election and pledges our support to ensure successful outcome of this meeting. We align ourselves to the statement read by Egypt on behalf of Group of 77 and China. The 25th session of the Governing Council takes place as preparations for Habitat 3 conference are in full swing, and we believe that this session and the theme discussed here in the coming days can significantly enhance and influence discussion in the United Nations on post-2015 development agenda and preparations for Habitat 3. The African Union, in its Agenda 2063, acknowledges our open code cities and other settlements are hubs of cultural and economic activities with modernized infrastructure, and people have access to all basic necessities of life, including shelter, water, sanitation, energy, public transport, and ICT, a close quote. South Africa, therefore, wishes to reaffirm its commitment to the principles outlined in the outcome document of the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, entitled Open Quote, The Future War We Want, close quote, which recognizes that if well planned and developed, including through integrated planning and management approaches, cities can promote economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable societies, and commit to working towards improving the quality of human settlements, including living and working conditions of both urban and rural dwellers in the context of poverty eradication, so that all people have access to basic services, housing, and mobility. The 2013 Open Working Group on the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals explicitly addressed the urban-rural linkages under the proposed targets to increase rural investment and support the positive economic, social, and environmental links between urban, peri-urban, and rural areas by strengthening national and regional development planning of these areas. We recommend that within the frame of national and urban human settlement policies, full recognition is accorded to varied developmental needs according to scale along rural-urban continuum to achieve the improved development of territories from rural clusters to metro conglomerations. The importance of strengthening such multi-level collaborative development planning in order to achieve our collective developmental goals cannot be overemphasized. In recognition of the central importance of development planning for coherent urbanization and human settlements, Governing Council in its last session requested that a set of agreed universal principles for urban and territorial planning should be developed. This recommendation has now resulted in the draft international guidelines on urban and territorial planning, which are to be under discussion during this session. South Africa supports these guidelines as they provide countries an opportunity to initiate a more globally coherent approach to creating inclusive and well-planned territories, to craft a more common language in the application of planning practices across the regions and states, and support the application of the proposed post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals. South Africa supports the adoption of inclusive approach and high-level integration between the proposed goals of 2015 Development Agenda with key elements of Habitat 3 Conference, New Urban Agenda, and related agreed outcomes. We wish to highlight the outcome of Sendai Conference on disaster risk reduction and climate change, which pledged to mainstream approaches to build safer, less risk vulnerable human settlements. Thus, in an increasingly urbanizing world, it is also critical that the SDGs directly reference the phenomena and demands of urbanization. South Africa supports the notion of proposed goal number 11 to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. In recognition to the need of local government level to play its role in the implementation of SDGs, we also support the consideration of proposals that may be targeted for the implementation and monitoring at a local level. So in summary, South Africa wants the conference to take account of the following. 1, the rural-urban continuum, the indivisible nature of human settlement scales of a two-way process, the rural and urban. Secondly, the guidelines of territorial urban planning will allow us progressively to apply universal references framework and planning approaches. Lastly, make cities and human settlement inclusive, safe and resilient and sustainable. We also want to emphasize the fact that we are also making urbanization practical in South Africa in a meaningful way. We are part of Presidential Council as human settlements, and we are revitalizing the mining towns. We have 50 catalyst projects across the country, which ensure that we are also having a massive informal settlement upgrading program. As South Africa, we wish UN Habitat a successful Habitat conference. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on the next speaker on my list. It is the Republic of Kenya, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Information, Communication and Technology.
The President of the Governing Council, the Executive Director of UN Habitat, honorable colleague ministers and heads of delegations, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, with your kind indulgence, may I start my remarks by expressing on my own behalf and on behalf of the government and the people of Kenya our very sincere gratitude to all of you and through you to the international community for standing with us as a country during the recent horrific, barbaric, murderous terrorist attack at Garissa University College. Your messages of sympathy, condolences, and comforting words of encouragement are highly appreciated. I am glad to join you during this 25th session of the Governing Council of UN Habitat, which brings together member states, relevant Habitat Agency, agenda partners, and other organizations of the United Nations system. Allow me to congratulate the Bureau on their election and wish them well on their assignment as we together consider the activities, work program, and budget of UN Habitat for the next biennium. I feel greatly privileged to be part of these discussions that will redefine the future of our habitat, as well as that of the agency responsible for supporting implementation of sustainable urbanization and human settlements. As we begin our session, we must be alive to the fact that the world is urbanizing rapidly, providing opportunities for economic growth of our cities and human settlements. Ladies and gentlemen, the special theme for the GC, UN Habitat's contribution to the post-2015 development agenda, is in order to promote sustainable development, sustainable urban development and human settlements, is thus opportune, coming at a time when the United Nations is finalizing on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. The year 2015 offers a unique opportunity for global leaders and partners to address poverty and inequalities posed by urbanization through economic transformation while protecting the environment. Goal 11 of the SDGs is particular on making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, borrows from the Habitat Agenda goal that emphasizes sustainable human settlements in an urbanizing world. This goal is very relevant to our discussions today and should be retained as a standalone goal of the SDGs under the supervision of UN Habitat. The special sub-theme on enhancing urban-rural linkages across the continuum of human settlement to harness transformative power of urbanization and sustainable development, underscores the interdependence between urban and rural areas, and emphasizes on rural-urban linkages while treating villages and cities as two ends of a human settlement continuum. This sub-theme should thus be carried forward to the Habitat 3 agenda as it captures the aspirations of all member states. The work of UN Habitat should therefore strengthen urban-rural linkages, maximize the benefits of sustainable urban development, and stimulate economic production in small towns and rural growth centers. In this regard, the governance review that is ongoing should focus on strengthening and transforming the UN Habitat to make it fit for purpose to effectively deliver on the SDGs and the envisaged new urban and human settlements agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, as we review the work program, activities and budget of the UN Habitat, there is need to address the imbalance between the non-earmarked and earmarked funding. The Executive Director should also re-evaluate the existing resource mobilization strategy with a view to making it robust enough to significantly address the existing financial resource challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, as we consider the activities of UN Habitat for the next biennium, there is the need for review of implementation of Habitat agenda through a synthesis of national reports. We also encourage UN Habitat, in collaboration with the Economic Commission for Africa, to facilitate focused regional and sub-regional meetings to discuss substantive issues soon after PrepCom 2 to harmonize regional positions. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, it is worthy to note that this is the last GC before the adoption of the post-2015 development goals and the new urban and human settlements agenda. We must therefore take advantage of this meeting to exchange views on innovative approaches that are concrete and robust to push the global urban agenda a notch higher. I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your very kind attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Kenya. Before I'll give the floor to the next speaker, let me to announce again the meeting of the drafting committee in the room number 9. As until now there are few delegations, I would like to ask the delegations to consider the importance of the participation in the work of the drafting committee and to take part in the meeting which is just convened now. Thank you very much. I now call on the next speaker on my list, which is the representative of the Republic of Mali, Monsignor Drahame Dembele, le Ministre de Urbanisme et de Habitat du Mali. Please take the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président du Conseil d'administration. Au nom de la délégation du Mali, je vous félicite pour votre élection. Excellences, Madame, Monsieur le Ministre, honorables invités, je voudrais commencer par remercier le gouvernement du Kenya pour son hospitalité et nous saluons la maturité du peuple kenyan pour la lutte implacable qu'il mène aujourd'hui contre le terrorisme. Nous avons une pensée pieuse pour toutes les victimes de la violence. Qu'il me soit permis de féliciter l'ensemble du système des Nations Unies et particulièrement le directeur exécutif de l'ONU Habitat et tous ses collaborateurs pour l'organisation de cette 25e session de notre conférence. Madame, Monsieur, le Mali fait face aujourd'hui à une insécurité imposée par les terroristes et par ma voix, au nom du président de la République du Mali, son Excellence, M. Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, et de son Premier ministre, Modibo Keïta, chef du gouvernement, nous renouvelons nos sincères remerciements à la communauté internationale, aux organisations régionales, à tous les pays amis qui nous ont soutenus dans cette dure épreuve et qui continuent à nous accompagner de façon remarquable. Aujourd'hui, des défis majeurs se posent au Mali, notamment la restauration de la sécurité sur toute l'étendue de notre territoire national, le retour de l'administration dans le nord du pays, l'impérieuse nécessité de répondre à l'attente des populations du Mali à travers la mise en œuvre de projets de portée économique, sociale et culturelle. Nous avons à cœur de fonder toutes ces actions sur une gouvernance de plus en plus améliorée. Encore une fois, nous remercions l'ensemble des partenaires multilatéraux et bilatéraux et sollicitons toujours leur accompagnement dans le cadre des projets de développement. Nous n'oublions pas de saluer l'action des organisations internationales et des pays voisins pour toute l'assistance portée aux populations maliennes déplacées du fait de la violence et de l'insécurité. En effet, le retour des réfugiés et des personnes déplacées dans les conditions de décence et de dignité constitue une préoccupation et nous avons à cœur d'y apporter une réponse adéquate avec le soutien de tous. Mesdames, Messieurs, nous saluons également les initiatives prises au sein de l'AMSUD qui est en voie de devenir un comité technique de l'Union africaine et de l'ONU Habitat pour contribuer à l'amélioration du cadre de vie des populations en intégrant dans nos démarches des défis liés au changement climatique, à l'éradication des bidonvilles et à la gestion foncière. C'est ainsi qu'au Mali, dans l'esprit de la déclaration de Bamako, des dispositions réglementaires et techniques sont en cours pour la définition d'une politique foncière, la mise en place d'un cadastre pour la prévention et la gestion des conflits fonciers, l'amélioration de la gouvernance foncière, la promotion des logements sociaux, la promotion des sociétés immobilières dans le cadre du partenariat public-privé, le transfert des ressources et des compétences aux collectivités décentralisées. Il nous faut également intégrer des expériences vécues, des connaissances locales et des aspects socioculturels dont dépend souvent le changement voulu. Ces initiatives, si elles sont mieux coordonnées, sans nul doute, permettront de renforcer la capacité de résistance et d'adaptation et transformant de façon qualitative en vue de promouvoir une croissance et un développement durable. Vive la solidarité internationale. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Mali, and now I call on the next speaker, the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Lesotho, Dr. Ponzo Matumelo Sekatle, Minister of the Local Government Chieftainship Affairs.
Your Excellency, President of the Governing Council of UN Habitat, Honorable Ministers, Heads of Delegations, Your Excellency, Director General of the United Nations Office in Nairobi, Your Excellency, Executive Director of UN Habitat, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The Kingdom of Lesotho passes sincere condolences to the government and the people of Kenya on the recent barbaric attack on the innocent Kenyan students at Garissa University campus. Our heartfelt condolences also go to all affected families and friends. Mr. President, I wish to congratulate you on your well-deserved election as President of the 25th session of the Governing Council of the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat. Your distinguished career assures us of a successful session. I assure you of my delegation's full cooperation. I would like also to express my appreciation to the Executive Director of UN Habitat for the presentation of a comprehensive report which, amongst others, highlights the implementation of the mandate and work program of UN Habitat. Mr. President, the special theme for this session, UN Habitat's contribution to the post-2015 development agenda in order to promote sustainable urban development and human settlements, comes at an opportune time when the international community is engaged in a process to elaborate an ambitious and visionary post-2015 development agenda. We must take full advantage
of this coincidence to ensure that the UN Habitat priorities are adequately addressed in the post-2015 development agenda to be adopted by our heads of state and government in September this year. As repeatedly echoed in various international fora, the post-2015 development agenda should not leave anyone behind. Lesotho regards the framework of the post-2015 development agenda as an opportunity to reaffirm the universal relevance of well-planned and managed cities as real drivers for change. To this end, we reaffirm the need to include key aspects of sustainable cities and human settlements in the post-2015 development agenda. This will harness the transformational power of cities to achieve and advance sustainable development. We are therefore pleased that the proposed Sustainable Development Goal 11 focuses on making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Mr. President, my government recognizes the critical role played by UN Habitat in developing the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda, particularly as we approach Habitat 3. We fully support the integrated approach towards implementation of UN Habitat Strategic Plan, which aims to address both the challenges and opportunities offered by urbanization. Moreover, my delegation supports the process of reforming UN Habitat into a more accountable, efficient, and well-resourced organization with an appropriate human resource complement. In relation to the budget for the biennium 2016-2017, we believe that having significant and stable resources is crucial to ensure that UN Habitat delivers on its core mandate. Mr. President, the elaboration of a new urban agenda is not only a global issue, but also a developmental concern that should be considered at the national level. Lesotho believes the future is urban, and therefore the issues of sustainable urban development and human settlements should be at the top of the new development agenda. Allow me at this point to highlight a few of the successes in the promotion of sustainable urban development and human settlements in Lesotho. Firstly, let me acknowledge UN Habitat's support in the establishment of Lesotho's National Habitat Committee. This committee, together with other urban dwellers, has been key in compiling the National Habitat 3 report, as well as identifying the country's priority areas for the development of a new urban agenda. The committee has also been instrumental in the development of the urban housing profile, which will inform the review of the national housing policy and the implementation of housing programs. We believe that the policy will continue to establish a nexus between the dynamics of urbanization and the overall process of national development. In partnership with development partners, the government of Lesotho has introduced land reforms that facilitate security of tenure and improve investments in land. Moreover, a series of prepared special plans are being implemented, ranging from the national, regional, and district physical plans and various local and subject area plans. The aim of these plans is to guide physical development and investment across the national space. After decades of 5-year development plans, Lesotho has for the first time developed a comprehensive national strategic development plan designed to implement Lesotho's long-term development goals. The NSDP recognizes the importance of regional, spatial, and economic programs to reduce poverty and achieve sustainable urban development. Recently, we adopted a decentralization policy with the aim to address citizens' needs for self-governance and equitable distribution of resources in both urban and rural areas. The government has also introduced infrastructure programs to improve access to basic services by all, especially in the rural and remote parts of the country. Mr. President, although our governments have made the best efforts to promote sustainable urban development and human settlements, a number of challenges still beset us. The new urban agenda should therefore take into consideration pressing challenges such as poverty and unemployment, especially as it affects the youth, the informal sector, and small-scale entrepreneurs, proliferation of slums, urban sprawl, insecurity of tenure, poor access to basic services, and inadequate provision of infrastructure, which still characterize our urban landscape. To conclude, it is our sincere hope that the new urban agenda will be all-encompassing, progressive, and action-oriented, while ensuring sustainability and building resilience for our human settlements. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Lesotho. I now call on the next speaker, the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Sweden, Mr. Johan Borgstam, Ambassador to Kenya, Head of the Mission Permanent Representative to UN Habitat.
Mr. President, distinguished ministers and delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me first associate myself fully with the statement made earlier by my European Union colleague on behalf of the European Union and its member states. I'm now going to make a few additional remarks from a Swedish national perspective. Sustainable, smart, resilient and inclusive cities are an issue of great importance to Sweden. Cities are economic hubs and catalysts for creativity and innovation, and drivers for entrepreneurship that can create new jobs and contribute to infrastructure and welfare solutions. Sustainable urban development is crucial if we are to tackle a number of key societal challenges. Also, it is of the utmost importance to ensure that gender aspects and the human rights perspective are integrated in urban planning. Being a major and long-standing partner of UN Habitat with a strong interest in these issues, I will now focus on what Sweden believes is crucial to strengthen UN Habitat's ability to fulfill its mandate effectively and to inspire confidence with existing and, equally important, potential new partners and donors. Sweden has carefully studied the recent report of OIOS on UN Habitat and its activities. We note with appreciation the positive developments on integration of gender issues as a cross-cutting theme within UN Habitat. Strengthening gender aspects within the work of UN Habitat is a high priority for Sweden. We encourage UN Habitat and its partners to continue this important work. We are further pleased to note the ongoing work by the Secretariat to strengthen the results-based management within UN Habitat, although we request a much stronger focus on impacts. At the same time, the OIOS reports highlight several areas where fundamental improvements are required in order for UN Habitat to be able to carry out its mandate in a satisfactory manner. Of particular concern to Sweden is that inadequate priority and hence funding has been invested in evaluation. We would also like to see far more concrete examples of how UN Habitat links its normative mandate on the one hand to its operational work in the field on the other hand. Mr. President, we note with concern that only 1 out of 20 country programs has delivered a satisfactory evaluation on which to draw conclusions on overall program performance. Furthermore, Mr. President, among UN Habitat's 75 country operations, 75, only 3 have conducted evaluations of any kind since 2008, and only 2 of sufficient quality to provide credible evidence of results. This, Mr. President, is not acceptable. We also note with concern that of UN Habitat's 6 largest projects, only 2 have evaluations planned and budgeted. In the light of this, Sweden urges UN Habitat to swiftly implement the recommendations of OIOS. The lack of a sufficient governance reform is highlighted in the OIOS report as a major constraint affecting UN Habitat's ability to achieve results. To Sweden, it is clear that without a better functioning governance structure, the ongoing reforms carried out on policy and management in response to the OIOS report will only have limited effect. Sweden remains engaged in this process. We hope negotiations will result in meaningful reform. Mr. President, the low level of core funding to UN Habitat is a concern to all of us. Sweden remains one of the few countries contributing to the general purpose foundations for the implementation of the program of work. The trend of a limited number of donors of core resources must be reversed. The lack of sufficient governance highlighted in the OIOS report must be addressed, as well as the recommendations of OIOS. In absence of results in these areas, it is rapidly becoming increasingly difficult for my country to justify why it should remain one of the few donors of core resources. Consequently, Mr. President, I warmly welcome the strong commitment communicated earlier today by His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya. I encourage other countries represented here to follow the example of our generous Kenyan hosts. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Sweden, and I now call on the next speaker, the distinguished representative of Sudan, Mukhtar A. Alam, State Minister, Minister of Environment, Forestry and Physical Development. Please take the floor.
شكرا جزيلا سيد الرئيس. السيدات والسادة، أود في مستهل كلمتي أن أتقدم بالتهنئة لسكرتارية برنامج الأمم المتحدة للمستوطنات البشرية على نجاحها في عقد هذه الدورة ال25 لمجلس إدارة الهابيتات، كما أهنئ الأعضاء الجدد في مجلس الإدارة، وأؤكد مجددا التزام السودان بالعمل معهم من أجل خلق بيئة حضرية عالمية يحظى فيها الجميع بالعمران الآمن والمستقر. كما لا يفوتني أن أتقدم بالشكر الجزير والتقدير للحكومة الكينية على التسهيلات المختلفة التي قدمتها لوفدنا والتي جعلت مشاركتنا في هذه الاجتماع ميسرة. كما أتقدم بتعازينا لحكومة وشعب كينيا في ضحايا الجريمة الإرهابية التي حدثت في جامعة غاريسا مؤخرا. السيد الرئيس، يجيء هذا الاجتماع في توقيت مهم، حيث نشهد الحملات المكثفة لوضع أجندة التنمية المستدامة لما بعد العام 2015 للوصول إلى عالم يسوده الرخاء والعدالة والحرية والكرامة والسلام. إن السودان سيعمل مع غيره من أعضاء الأسرة الدولية على إنجاح هذه الحملات، إيمانا منه بضرورة تكاتف الجهود والسبل لخلق واقع أفضل للجميع. ويحدوني أمل كبير في أن تسهم نتائج اجتماعنا هذا في صياغة أجندة للتنمية المذكورة. السيدات والسادة، إن قضية التنمية الحضرية والعمران هي قضية محورية تستحق الاهتمام من كل المؤسسات الحكومية وغيرها من الشركاء المهتمين بهذه القضية. فمسؤولية إيجاد حلول للمشكلات الحضرية هي مسؤولية جماعية وتضامنية. في السودان فقد قامت الحكومة بوضع عدد من الخطط والاستراتيجيات تأخذ في الاعتبار تلبية الحاجة المتنامية للسكن والخدمات الأساسية والبنيان. هذه الحاجة نابعة من عدد من العوامل التي تتمثل في زيادة نسبة السكان، عجز المعروض من المساكن والخدمات عن تلبية الطلب المتزايد، الازدحام ونمو بعض الامتدادات العشوائية وغير المخطط لها، ازدياد الزحف الصحراوي والتصحر وأثره على انتقال السكان بأعداد كبيرة إلى مناطق غير المتأثرة. لمقابلة هذه العوامل فإن الحكومة السودانية تعمل بشكل وثيق مع القطاع الخاص والأطراف ذات الصلة من أجل توفير المزيد من المشاريع الإسكان التي يتم تزويدها بخدمات الكهرباء والمياه وغيرها. كما تشجع الحكومة المستثمرين ورجال الأعمال على الدخول في مجال المخططات السكنية منخفضة التكلفة. هذه الخطة تستهدف عدد من شرائح المجتمع مثل الفقراء وذوي الدخل المحدود، موظفي الحكومة والقطاع العام، أصحاب الدخول المتوسطة، والأشخاص المتأثرين بالنزاعات والكوارث الطبيعية، لتمكين المواطنين من مختلف الفئات من الوصول إلى السكن الملائم والمناسب في الولايات الكافة. الحضور الكريم، إن هناك زحفا عمرانيا باتجاه المدن، وهذا يترتب عليه العديد من المصاعب، وهو تحدي كبير يتوجب علينا التعامل معه بما يتناسب مع حجم المشكلة. وفي هذا السياق فإننا نتطلع إلى الدعم الفني لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للمستوطنات البشرية في مجال بناء ورفع القدرات والتخطيط الحضري وغيرها من المجالات الهندسية والفنية، حتى نتمكن من تنفيذ أهداف خطتنا الوطنية ربع القرنية بحلول العام 2030. السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، إن السودان يضم صوته إلى الدعوات المنادية بتقوية برنامج الأمم المتحدة للمستوطنات البشرية من أجل منظمة فعالة وقادرة على تنفيذ الأهداف الموكلة لها، ونأمل بأن يسهم هذا الجمع في إيجاد آليات لترسيخ التعاون بين الجميع وإزالة المعيقات وتعزيز الهياكل الموجودة لتؤدي دورها الرقابي على النحو المطلوب. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sudan. I now call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of Mexico, Jorge Armando Guerrero Espinoza, Coordinator General, Ministry of Agrarian, Terrestrial and Urban Development. Please take the floor.
Con su permiso, señor presidente, permítame iniciar expresando las condolencias al pueblo y gobierno de Kenia por las muertes que ocasionó el deplorable ataque en Garissa. México presentó en la segunda sesión del Comité Preparatorio rumbo a Hábitat 3 su reporte nacional, en el que destacan los avances y retos en materia de vivienda y desarrollo urbano de los últimos 20 años. En dicha intervención, y con base en lo que el reporte establece, se señaló la importancia de contar con un marco institucional y normativo que, a nivel nacional, permita conducir la planeación y gestión urbana rumbo a la consecución de objetivos nacionales de desarrollo y prosperidad. En el mismo sentido, sostenemos que en la esfera internacional, el rol que puede desempeñar una agencia de Naciones Unidas dedicada a promover la sustentabilidad y equidad de los asentamientos humanos es fundamental para enfrentar de manera integral los desafíos y oportunidades que representa la urbanización acelerada. Por ello, durante los últimos 2 años, México ha fortalecido y renovado su compromiso con ONU Hábitat. El Programa Nacional de Desarrollo Urbano y el Programa Nacional de Vivienda, publicados por el Gobierno Nacional, encuentran muchas coincidencias con la agenda urbana promovida por ONU Hábitat. Sobre la base de ese encuentro ideológico, hemos construido bases institucionales y programáticas para la cooperación, entre las que destacan la firma del Convenio Marco de Colaboración entre el Gobierno mexicano y el Programa ONU Hábitat en julio de 2014, la firma del Acuerdo Específico de Colaboración del programa con la Secretaría de Desarrollo Agrario, Territorial y Urbano en agosto del año pasado, el establecimiento de una representación nacional de la agencia en México, que enriquece lo que durante años se había logrado mediante una coordinación nacional del programa en el país. El renovado activismo de legisladores locales y nacionales, miembros del Grupo de Parlamentarios por el Hábitat, que a nivel global es actualmente presidido por un diputado mexicano y que cuenta con capítulos a nivel nacional y local muy fuertes y comprometidos. Asimismo, México participa activamente en la Asamblea General de Ministros y Autoridades Máximas de Vivienda y Urbanismo de América Latina y el Caribe, MINURBI, como una plataforma hacia Hábitat 3 con propuestas de consenso de nuestros gobiernos frente a las prioridades de la vivienda y el desarrollo urbano de nuestro continente. En este sentido, hacemos un llamado a la comunidad internacional sobre los siguientes planteamientos. 1. Considerar el derecho a la vivienda como elemento prioritario del derecho a la ciudad. 2. Debemos seguir avanzando en las acciones que permitan el goce efectivo del derecho a la vivienda, como son ampliar las políticas y programas para atender el déficit cualitativo, el acceso de los hogares de menores ingresos al financiamiento de la vivienda con crédito y subsidios bien focalizados, optimización de materiales y sistemas constructivos, así como el acceso a suelo urbanizado. 3. Mantener en la primera línea de prioridad de los gobiernos de la región la solución a la vivienda social urbana y rural, en un contexto de desarrollo urbano regional sostenible, que considere que las demandas urbanas de alimentación, agua, aire y otros recursos naturales provienen fundamentalmente de las zonas rurales. 4. Priorizar a la vivienda dentro de los 3 pilares de la nueva Agenda Urbana Sostenible promovida por ONU Habitat, en las áreas de planificación y diseño, gobernanza y legislación, así como en economía y financiamiento urbano. 5. La vivienda es también una forma de expresión de la cultura de la diversidad. La vida de comunidad y barrio o colonia constituye el tejido social. En este sentido, reconocemos la importancia de fortalecer la cultura urbana diversa y plural con un papel central en la construcción de ciudadanía. 6. Rescatar y promover una cultura del desarrollo urbano rural ambientalmente sostenible que reconozca y promueva la biodiversidad. 7. Matizar el énfasis que en ocasiones las políticas de vivienda y desarrollo urbano han puesto en la vivienda formal, la vivienda nueva y en las grandes ciudades. Es necesario ampliar las políticas y programas hacia localidades pequeñas, intermedias y rurales. El desarrollo rural oferta bienes ambientales a las ciudades tales como agua, energía renovable, entre otros. Por ello consideramos que la vivienda rural vinculada a la productividad campo-ciudad es prioritaria para desacelerar la migración urbana y fomentar la competitividad territorial. Además, resulta indispensable ofrecer nuevos modelos de desarrollo rural vinculados a las oportunidades que ofrecen los mercados urbanos. México, bajo el liderazgo de la Secretaría de Desarrollo Agrario, Territorial y Urbano, encuentra en ONU Habitat un aliado estratégico en la tarea de transformar a las ciudades, participando de manera decidida en espacios de discusión internacional y promoviendo la adopción de un objetivo de desarrollo sustentable relacionado con la urbanización dentro de la Agencia de Desarrollo posterior a 2015. Sin embargo, necesitamos fortalecer a la agencia, es un momento clave para hacerlo. La adopción e instrumentación de la Agenda Post-2015 y la Conferencia Hábitat 3 representan oportunidades únicas para que, de la mano de la comunidad internacional, posicionemos a las ciudades como espacios estratégicos para garantizar la sostenibilidad del desarrollo global. Por ello, es indispensable que ONU Habitat cuente con la fortaleza institucional necesarias para insertar esta visión dentro de los debates. México hace votos por concluir satisfactoriamente el proceso de discusión sobre el fortalecimiento del modelo de gobernanza del programa de ONU Habitat durante el 25º periodo de sesiones del Consejo de Administración, buscando así reconocer el trabajo reflexivo y el esfuerzo que desde hace 6 años se inició, y sobre todo buscando fortalecer la capacidad de ONU Habitat para cumplir con su mandato y ser una agencia con relevancia universal. Hacemos votos también por vigorizar el marco de rendición de cuentas de ONU Habitat, estrategia necesaria y adecuada para favorecer un mayor involucramiento y sentido de pertenencia para todos los países, sobre todo de cara al trabajo futuro vinculado a la Agenda de Desarrollo posterior a 2015. ONU Habitat cuenta con la capacidad y los conocimientos para contribuir en ese importante proceso, y esa ardua tarea le será más sencilla al contar con el amplio respaldo de los países miembros en lo sustantivo, así como también en sus contribuciones financieras. Para lograr estos objetivos, México se pronuncia por la creación de un grupo que permita un trabajo constante y flexible, del cual emanen recomendaciones útiles en la mejora de la implementación del programa de trabajo y el desarrollo del plan estratégico. en una mayor transparencia y rendición de cuentas que construya una sólida confianza de todos los Estados miembros, así como en el desarrollo de una estrategia de comunicación que presente al programa en su justa dimensión. El trabajo normativo, así como el de cooperación técnica, son elementos que no deben separarse uno del otro, por lo que esperamos que la revisión de la gobernanza provea de un nuevo impulso para que el programa desarrolle su mandato desde una base más sólida, en una dinámica virtuosa donde los proyectos de cooperación alimenten sustantivamente el trabajo normativo. Señor Presidente, debemos asumir colectivamente la responsabilidad de posicionar a las ciudades en el centro de las discusiones globales sobre la sustentabilidad y el desarrollo para las próximas décadas. Esta tarea requiere la conducción de los gobiernos nacionales, la vinculación corresponsable de los gobiernos subnacionales, la acción decidida de las organizaciones sociales y una institución fuerte dentro del sistema de Naciones Unidas donde encauzar y promover las políticas de desarrollo urbano y vivienda. Estamos atentos a los acuerdos que deriven en esta sesión con miras a consolidar a ONU Habitat como una agencia eficaz, parte fundamental de la implementación de la Agenda Global de Desarrollo en los próximos años. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico. And now I call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of the United States of America, Mr. Tobias Glucksmann, permanent representative to UN Habitat.
Thank you, Mr. President. The U.S. joins other delegations in extending our deepest condolences to the people of Kenya and the victims and their families of those affected by the heinous terrorist attack at Garissa University. We strongly condemn that horrific act, and we continue to stand by the people of Kenya in fighting the scourge of terrorism. Mr. President, distinguished ministers and delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to first congratulate you, Professor Jan Ilavsky, on your election as President of the Governing Council Bureau, as well as all the distinguished members of the new Bureau. Thank you for your extraordinary commitments, the extraordinary commitments you will be making in support of our collective efforts as a Governing Council to support UN Habitat through continued strategic guidance and oversight. UN Habitat is at a critical juncture. Its earmarked project work continues to soar, a reflection that partners see value in the organization's normative expertise and field work. However, UN Habitat continues to face financial challenges within its core budget, in particular with regard to voluntary, non-earmarked core contributions, an important source of funding that supports its normative work and sets it apart in terms of its expertise and value added. With UN Habitat's core finances struggling and its earmarked project work expanding rapidly, many donor and recipient countries see a pressing need for meaningful governance reform to strengthen oversight beyond decision-making of a governing council once every 2 years. Recognizing the role UN Habitat can play in a rapidly urbanizing world and in addressing root causes of conflict in many societies and regions, the United States is helping to facilitate a governance reform package during this Governing Council to help ensure the organization grows stronger, not weaker, as we collectively work to finalize a new global sustainable development agenda and prepare for the Habitat III conference in 2016. UN Habitat has made good progress toward improving efficiency and effectiveness since the 2013 Governing Council. It has learned to do more with less, but much work remains. The United States commends UN Habitat's successful implementation of international public sector accounting standards and its progress toward full implementation of the Umoja Enterprise Resource Planning System. We urge UN Habitat to fully implement Umoja by the June 1st deadline as planned. We look forward to saying very soon that UN Habitat led the way for the rest of the UN Secretariat in implementing these major reforms. The United States appreciates the challenges UN Habitat continues to face in undertaking these initiatives and applauds its commitment and its groundbreaking role. We also look forward to learning more about how UN Habitat will monitor the use of IPSIS and use the information attained to support decision-making in the organization, particularly in key areas such as procurement and human resources. Once fully implemented, Umoja should help achieve more efficient and harmonized business practices, including processes for recruitment and procurement of goods and services. We welcome updates on the rollout process and its impact on the organization. In a time of ever-increasing scrutiny of public spending, it is critical that all UN development agencies adhere to the highest possible standards of ethics and professional behavior. Our delegation appreciates the steps taken by leadership to improve the culture of ethics, integrity, and accountability at UN Habitat. However, more can and should be done to further enhance that culture. We note with appreciation that emerging evaluation culture in UN Habitat since the establishment of an independent evaluation unit in 2012 and the adoption of the UN Habitat evaluation policy in 2013. We encourage UN Habitat to further these reforms across all levels of the organization and particularly at the regional and country levels. Additionally, we hope UN Habitat will use information attained through monitoring and evaluations to better develop and inform its policies, programs, and priorities. We note with appreciation UN Habitat's overall success in achieving the indicator targets in its work program. That said, we urge UN Habitat to conduct more robust, systematic monitoring of projects during implementation. The inherent nature of UN Habitat's work in remote and unstable areas exposes the organization to risk. We urge UN Habitat to establish and implement a risk management mechanism to identify vulnerabilities early on and prevent them from developing into crises. For example, while consultants provide technical expertise for UN Habitat, we are concerned some of those same consultants are also being asked to carry out core functions of the organization, often without appropriately delegated financial and supervisory authority. We encourage UN Habitat to develop a risk management plan to identify delegations of authority, processes for appointing consultants, and mechanisms to retain institutional knowledge, since consultants are often employed only on short-term contracts. Similarly, partnerships comprise an essential but also high-risk component of UN Habitat's work. To ensure that the organization is operating as efficiently and effectively as possible, we encourage UN Habitat to establish clear processes for selecting, monitoring, and determining when partnerships should be renewed or discontinued. Turning back to the critical issue of core funding, the United States wishes to stress that many traditional donors are continuing to face stark budget realities. It is incumbent on UN Habitat to implement a more robust and effective resource mobilization strategy that ensures the organization broadens and deepens its donor base. The organization is in a competition for limited pools of funding with other development organizations, and potential donors are often making funding decisions based on where they see the highest impact for their investment. UN Habitat must do better in terms of getting the word out about its successes in the field, its critical mandate, and its strategy going forward. The battle for the hearts and minds of the public and donors is no longer fought with press releases and events or at conferences. It is taking place in cyberspace. It is through interactive and regularly updated websites. It is through targeted emails. It is through postings on Facebook, and it is through tweets. But foremost, it is the ability to produce program results and demonstrate their impact systematically. For too long now, UN Habitat's key strategic communications position has remained vacant, and the organization has functioned without a well-developed communications strategy. The U.S. urges UN Habitat to take remedial measures in this regard as soon as possible. Distinguished colleagues, the U.S. looks forward to working with all members of the Governing Council in the days ahead and to taking the difficult but important decisions needed to ensure that UN Habitat is well positioned to best fulfill its mandate, including support for the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States of America, and now I call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Norway, Mr. Hans Bratskar, Ambassador to Kenya, Head of Mission, Permanent Representative to UN Habitat.
Mr. President, Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, urbanization is a major driver of innovation, development, and economic well-being, but also of slums, diseases, pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and environmental degradation. Our common challenge is to build vibrant and resilient cities and towns. UN Habitat has made great contributions to this end. Through its many programs and projects, it has helped create and develop livable and more sustainable human settlements. And it has done so by integrating the hopes and visions of youth. The voices of tomorrow's city dwellers must be heard in decision-making processes today. Therefore, Norway has included a youth representative in our delegation. Mr. President, the main questions we face at this Governing Council is firstly what role we foresee UN Habitat to play in the follow-up of the post-2015 summit and the Habitat III conference. And secondly, what must be done to make the organization fit for those tasks. Norway is not confident that UN Habitat can play the role it ought to in the follow-up of the SDG summit and Habitat III. In our opinion, the governance structure of UN Habitat is too ineffective, the donor base for core support too narrow, and the organizational weaknesses too evident. Mr. President, Norway is committed to working towards a stronger, more efficient, and even more relevant UN Habitat. For my government, it is essential that this Governing Council reach agreement on reform of UN Habitat's governance structure. We need an operational and efficient structure where Member States get a better oversight of the earmarked project portfolio in order to ensure alignment with the organization's mandate, strategic priorities, and program of work and budget. Increased oversight is also needed with regard to resource mobilization and implementation of external evaluations. As important, we need to see increased confidence in UN Habitat from existing as well as new donors. UN Habitat needs to greatly strengthen the mobilization of core funding, including broadening the base of core donors. Today, Norway remains one of only a very few countries contributing to UN Habitat's General Purpose Foundation. We are very glad to hear that Kenya will increase its core funding, but more countries need to step forward. Finally, all recommendations in the OIOS report on UN Habitat's relevance, effectiveness, and efficiency must be followed up in an urgent and coherent manner. The report highlights several areas where fundamental improvements are required for UN Habitat to be able to carry out its mandate. Norway will pay specific attention to the follow-up of the OIOS recommendations concerning improved result-based management, increased collaboration and partnership within, as well as outside the UN system, better documentation of results, and enhanced transparency and accountability. We are looking forward to hearing more about the steps UN Habitat has taken so far, and we need to see further steps in relevant resolutions from this Governing Council. So, Mr. President, Norway would like to see a strong and effective UN habitat that can be in the forefront of meeting tomorrow's urban challenges. To be able to do that, we believe major changes are urgently needed. Unless we see such changes, it will be difficult for my government to continue supporting UN habitat the way we do today. Thank you.
I now thank the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Norway, and now I call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of the People's Republic of China, Mr. Chen Dawei, Vice Minister of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development. Please take the floor.
尊敬的主席先生，各位代表、女士们、先生们，大家好。首先，我代表中国代表团对遭受恐怖袭击的遇难者表示沉痛的悼念，向他们的家属表示诚挚的慰问我们赞赏肯尼亚人民的勇气我们会坚定地支持他们的反恐斗争。同时我们对主席先生当选，对本次会议的召开表示热烈的祝贺。过去30年中国经历了历史上规模最大、速度最快的城镇化进程在城市长大的同时人居环境呢也有了明显的改善。请允许我在这里呢和大家分享我们的实践第一，推进新型城镇化建设。中国政府颁布了国家新型城镇化规划，提出了城镇化必须以人为核心，有序推进农业转移人口的市民化，推动大中小城市协调发展重视这个推进城乡规划它的引领作用提高城市可持续发展能力要健全旧城改造机制，优化提升旧城的功能另外呢，要推进城乡教育、医疗、文化、体育设施建设，推进基本公共服务均等化提高公民的素质和幸福指数。要强化文化的传承和创新，要更加注重人文城市的建设。第二，加快解决中低收入家庭住房困难。1978年到2013年，中国在城镇人口增加3倍的情况下，城镇居民的人居住房面积增加了4倍，达到了33.3平方米。同时，中国政府大规模实施保障性安居工程，到去年年底，累计帮助4000多万户家庭解决了住房问题。第三，提高城市基础设施建设和管理水平。中国政府重视通过加强城市基础设施建设，改善城市人居环境。截至2013年，中国城市的供水普及率达到了98%，污水处理率达到了89.34%，生活垃圾无害化处理率达到了90%，全面推进城市地下综合管廊的建设，加强无障碍环境建设，并且充分地利用信息技术，提高城市的精细化管理水平。第四，坚持转型发展，推动生态城市建设，强化城乡规划的公共政策定位，优化配置空间资源，将水、土地等资源环境承载力约束指标作为发展的底线约束，加强生态保护生态系统建设和生态修复，推广绿色建筑， 开展既有建筑节能改造，加强资源循环利用设施建设，发展绿色交通，优先发展公共交通，优化步行和自行车道路系统，开展低碳生态城市建设试点并且建设能使雨水自然积存、自然渗透、自然净化的海绵城市。当前，中国的城镇化和城市发展也面临着严重的挑战。一是城市发展模式必须由外延式扩张转向内涵式集约发展；二是城市综合承载能力、管理水平还要不断的提高；三是要面对区域发展不平衡的问题；四是城乡建设同时如何对历史文化遗产有更好的保护；五是城乡应急安全保障能力薄弱我们愿意借鉴先进理念和其他国家的成功的经验积极地解决这些问题，努力建设宜居宜业、富有特色、充满活力的现代城市。女士们、先生们，城市在可持续发展中的作用至关重要。中国政府支持将可持续城市发展纳入2015年后发展议程。我们期待联合国人居署继续在该领域发挥建设性的作用，并将一如既往地支持人居署的工作。人居3大会筹委会第2次会议于昨日结束，我们对有关各方所做的大量的工作表示感谢。中国住房城乡建设部已按要求向大会秘书处提交了国家报告，并将继续积极参与大会的筹备进程。我们正在与联合国人居署和有关国家就今年世界城市日的活动方案进行沟通，希望各理事国继续支持、积极参与。中国住房城乡建设部愿进一步加强与各方的合作和交流，共同推进世界人居环境的可持续发展。最后，祝理事会议取得圆满成功。谢谢大家。
I thank the distinguished representative of the People's Republic of China. And now I call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of the Republic of Senegal, Honorable Bien Farba Sarr, Minister of Urban Renewal, Housing and Urban Development. Please take the floor.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames, Messieurs les ministres, chers collègues, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi tout d'abord de me réjouir au nom de la délégation qui m'accompagne et en mon nom personnel de l'accueil particulièrement chaleureux qui nous a été réservé depuis notre arrivée à Nairobi. Que les estimés peuples et gouvernements kenyans en soient chaleureusement remerciés. Je voudrais aussi renouveler notre solidarité au peuple kényan et nos sincères condoléances aux familles des victimes de l'odieux attentat dont l'université de Garissa a fait l'objet. Il m'est agréable, Monsieur le Président, de vous féliciter de votre élection à la présidence de la 25e session du Conseil d'administration de l'ONU Habitat. Je voudrais également exprimer naturellement ma profonde reconnaissance au secrétariat pour ses efforts inlassables dans la préparation de cette rencontre. Cette agréable occasion m'offre également l'opportunité d'adresser les remerciements de ma délégation au Dr Juan Clos, directeur exécutif de l'ONU Habitat, et à l'ensemble de ses collaborateurs pour leur contribution appréciable au divers processus de mise en œuvre des programmes en matière d'habitat et d'urbanisation. Monsieur le Président, la forte mobilisation autour du développement durable et de l'agenda du développement post-2015 n'aura d'effet escompté pour nos États que si les politiques et actions menées auront bien entendu des implications directes et fortement positives sur les questions conditionnant leur développement. À ce titre, il convient naturellement de s'accorder sur le fait que relever un tel défi et bâtir conséquemment l'avenir que nous voulons dans l'esprit de Rio +20 nécessite des efforts plus soutenus pour apporter davantage de solutions aux défis de l'urbanisation rapide, en l'occurrence le développement de l'habitat non planifié et l'extension démesurée des grandes villes, y compris la pauvreté urbaine et les inégalités. Une telle ambition requiert également l'adoption de politiques efficaces de restructuration des centres urbains et de modernisation de l'habitat rural, de réactualisation des instruments de planification urbaine en y intégrant la prévention des risques de catastrophes et l'adaptation au changement climatique. À cela s'ajoute la promotion des pôles urbains, la problématique de la résilience des villes et la prise en compte des impératifs liés à l'efficacité énergétique. Cela dit, il convient de garder à l'esprit la nécessité d'assurer une bonne promotion des politiques d'urbanisation et d'aménagement urbain à l'effet d'apporter les transformations structurelles nécessaires à nos centres urbains pour contribuer de façon significative à améliorer la croissance économique des pays en développement. Monsieur le Président, dans une telle entreprise ONU Habitat, un champ spécialisé dans ce domaine doit occuper une place prépondérante afin de poursuivre efficacement sa double mission de promotion d'un développement socialement, économiquement et écologiquement durable des établissements humains et de réalisation de logements convenables pour tous. Le rôle déterminant que joue avec constance ONU Habitat dans les divers processus de mise en œuvre des programmes nationaux en matière d'urbanisation dans les pays en développement illustre éloquemment l'importance de l'impliquer suffisamment en amont comme en aval dans le programme de développement post-2015. C'est pourquoi l'État du Sénégal estime que l'institution doit être appuyée, ses capacités renforcées et son important travail soutenu par des structures régionales efficaces comme la conférence ministérielle africaine sur l'habitat et le développement urbain pour une meilleure prise en compte de la question urbaine dans les politiques régionales. Monsieur le Président, au regard des défis importants auxquels nos États sont confrontés en matière d'urbanisation, l'État du Sénégal, sous l'impulsion de son Excellence, Monsieur le Président Macky Sall, a procédé à une réorientation globale de sa politique nationale de développement avec un nouveau cadre de référence dénommé Plan Sénégal émergent. Ce plan s'appuie opportunément sur une politique de territorialisation des politiques publiques qui consacre le principe de la communalisation intégrale. La finalité de ces instruments et d'autres encore est d'instaurer une dynamique positive en vue d'assurer les bases d'une émergence économique durable, d'adapter les orientations nationales et sectorielles aux spécificités sans oublier les priorités des territoires et le souci de procéder sans oublier les priorités des territoires, l'offre d'habitat social ainsi qu'à l'amélioration des écosystèmes de construction. Ces initiatives viennent consolider les efforts considérables menés par le gouvernement du Sénégal depuis des décennies pour mettre en œuvre des politiques publiques efficientes. Il s'agit notamment de l'adoption du Code de l'urbanisme et d'instruments de planification urbaine, de programmes d'aménagement des parcelles outre l'installation d'institutions de promotion de l'habitat et de financement du logement. Monsieur le Président, en dépit de ces résultats positifs traduisant l'engagement résolu du Sénégal dans la voie du renouveau urbain, il convient d'admettre que des contraintes réelles subsistent et appellent de notre part engagement et mobilisation pour y remédier. Le programme Gouyoum, en cours d'élaboration grâce au soutien d'ONU Habitat, s'inscrit dans cette perspective. Son objectif est de généraliser la dotation de documents de planification dans les villes, d'accélérer l'offre d'habitat social en mettant sur le marché annuellement 25 unités d'habitation et de promouvoir les pôles urbains. Ce programme, une fois finalisé et mis en œuvre, permettra sans nul doute de répondre aux exigences du développement urbain durable. Dans la même veine, le gouvernement du Sénégal en appelle à la communauté internationale et aux divers partenaires pour la réalisation des infrastructures dans le cadre du nouveau partenariat pour le développement de l'Afrique, appelé NEPAD. Je vous remercie.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Senegal. I now call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of the Republic of Cuba, Ambassador Raul Rodriguez Ramos, permanent representative to UN Habitat, permanent mission of the Republic of Cuba.
Señor Presidente, en primer lugar, nuestra delegación desea felicitarlo por su elección, así como al resto del Buró, y le expresamos nuestra disposición de trabajar de conjunto para el éxito de este Consejo. Nuestra delegación se adhiere plenamente al contenido y las posiciones expresadas en nombre de los países de América Latina y del Caribe y el Grupo 77 más China. Agradezco la oportunidad de compartir algunas consideraciones en el ámbito de esta trascendental sesión. La región de América Latina y el Caribe se enfrenta a viejos y nuevos desafíos en el ámbito de la vivienda y el urbanismo. Apoyamos la voluntad y los esfuerzos de ONU Habitat en promover y propiciar un desarrollo sostenible y un futuro mejor para las ciudades y sus habitantes. Ciudades planificadas, inclusivas, equitativas, seguras, resilientes. Nuestro ordenamiento territorial y urbano en los asentamientos del país, con enfoque estratégico, participativo, sostenible y gestionable, constituye expresión espacial de su desarrollo que articula los procesos nacionales, regionales y locales. Asegura materializar la política económica, social, cultural y ambiental, las estructuras urbanas compactas, el aprovechamiento del suelo, altas densidades, reducir la vulnerabilidad de asentamientos humanos por eventos extremos y el cambio climático, prevención y su adaptación. Señor Presidente, un desarrollo urbano sostenible debe implementar en sus estrategias que el aumento generado de los ingresos locales y municipales se proyecten a proporcionar una gestión eficaz y el acceso de todos sus habitantes a los servicios básicos urbanos. Los países de manera universal deberían adoptar políticas urbanas sostenibles mediante la protección social de las poblaciones más vulnerables, derivado del presupuesto nacional, que contribuyan a la reducción de las desigualdades e impulsen el comportamiento y la participación de estos grupos para garantizar la seguridad urbana y los beneficios que ofrecen las ciudades. Para ello se requiere mantener el papel fundamental de los Estados como eje y guía en la implementación de las políticas y legislaciones inclusivas y eficaces para el desarrollo sostenible de las poblaciones urbanas y rurales. Consideramos muy importante seguir trabajando para evitar que continúen creciendo las oleadas de población que fluyen en las ciudades, que propicien el surgimiento y agudización de asentamientos informales vulnerables ante eventos naturales severos. Es muy importante impulsar el desarrollo a nivel local con amplia participación institucional y ciudadana y promover modelos de desarrollo acorde con sus posibilidades de implementación. ONU Habitat ha contribuido mediante la transferencia de conocimientos, la aplicación y consolidación de metodologías y prácticas de desarrollo local para los asentamientos humanos, a la capacidad de los gobiernos locales y de las comunidades en materia de planeamiento, gestión urbana y la vivienda. Existen en Cuba ejemplos de buenas prácticas en la realización de consultas urbanas. En Cuba, gobiernos locales como Santiago de Cuba, Holguín y Bayamo trabajan con el acompañamiento de ONU Habitat en la recuperación tras el paso de eventos meteorológicos, en la implementación de herramientas, así como su asimilación en el uso de los recursos constructivos necesarios. Cuba apoya y seguirá impulsando en todos los escenarios el acceso equitativo a los servicios básicos urbanos y mejorar las condiciones de vida tanto en las zonas urbanas como rurales. el 100% de la población cubana tiene acceso a los servicios básicos urbanos, siendo gratuitos la enseñanza y los servicios de salud en todos los niveles. Es elevado y creciente el acceso a la electricidad, el agua potable y la cobertura de saneamiento. Señor Presidente, este Consejo debe propiciar la discusión de apremiantes temas, considerando que sus resultados constituirán aportes a la Agenda de Desarrollo post-2015 y a la vez se beneficiará de ellos. Las nuevas metas que se acuerden en materia de desarrollo urbano sostenible deben estar dirigidas a eliminar los altos índices de inequidad y marginalidad urbana, consolidar el desarrollo integral de jóvenes, mujeres y niñas y contrarrestar los factores históricos y estructurales que perpetúan la discriminación por motivo de género, incrementar el círculo de la pobreza y la marginación. Cuba y el resto de los países que habitamos la región del Caribe, por su ubicación geográfica y por los efectos del cambio climático, enfrentamos graves afectaciones por los ciclones tropicales, lo cual ha incrementado bruscamente el déficit habitacional de nuestros países. En este sentido, Cuba cuenta con una capacidad organizativa y la estructura para evitar o aminorar las catástrofes que acompañan tales fenómenos, pues dispone de un sistema preventivo y de respuesta rápida que se organiza bajo el sistema de la defensa civil con vasta experiencia avalada internacionalmente. La gestión y reducción de riesgos contempla un proceso de preparación y planificación de acciones de mitigación y adaptativas al cambio climático y sus efectos derivados. Incluye la identificación de áreas de vulnerabilidad, peligro y acciones en defensa del cumplimiento de las normativas urbanísticas en las zonas costeras. Nuestra modesta experiencia la ponemos a disposición de los países que son afectados por eventos climatológicos. No poseemos financiamientos que ofrecer, pero sí especialistas altamente capacitados y un sistema de gestión a compartir con todos los países que lo requieran. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Cuba, and now I call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of Argentina, Ambassador Bibiana Jones, permanent representative of Argentina to UN Habitat. Please take the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. La Argentina se une a todos los quienes han expresado sus sinceras condolencias por el cruento ataque que sufrió Kenia el pasado 2 de abril. Por otra parte, queremos asociarnos también a las presentaciones efectuadas por las distinguidas delegaciones de México y de Egipto en nombre del GRULAC y del G77 más China, respectivamente. Consideramos que este 25º Consejo de Administración es una doble oportunidad. Por un lado, para realizar un balance sobre el trabajo realizado por UN Habitat hasta el momento, y por otro lado, para seguir pensando y diseñando distintos caminos que nos conduzcan a alcanzar el objetivo último que nos hemos propuesto, lograr el desarrollo sustentable. Cuando nos propusimos pensar cuáles han sido los cambios sustanciales de estos últimos 2 años en materia de desarrollo sustentable, nos encontramos con un panorama complejo. En particular, el Gobierno argentino ha propiciado la inclusión de millones de habitantes a través de políticas que pusieron el acento en la valorización de zonas y de comunidades marginadas a través de la generación de empleo, la provisión de servicios básicos, la diversificación de la matriz productiva y dándole prioridad a las necesidades de los grupos vulnerables, entre ellos mujeres, niños, adultos mayores y personas con discapacidad. No obstante, somos conscientes que muchas veces las mejoras vienen acompañadas de consecuencias no deseadas, sobre todo en materia ambiental.
Estas situaciones son las que hacen necesario el constante desarrollo a nivel nacional y regional de políticas habitacionales amplias y multisectoriales que traten temas tales como la gobernabilidad, polución, equidad, revalorización de barrios periféricos, entre otras cosas. En este mismo sentido, celebramos el trabajo realizado a nivel mundial por Habitat en pos de la concientización sobre los desafíos que plantea el desarrollo urbano. Señor Presidente, la celebración de este Consejo de Administración nos encuentra atravesando una coyuntura muy particular. La reforma de gobernanza que estamos encarando marcará nuestra manera de trabajar de aquí en adelante. Por esta razón, confiamos en que la reforma sea el medio para hacer más efectivo el trabajo de este Consejo Administrativo y del Comité de Representantes Permanentes, logro que solo se alcanzará dotándolos de mayor transparencia y representatividad por medio del equilibrio regional. Asimismo, la culminación de las negociaciones sobre los objetivos de desarrollo sustentable dio un impulso renovado al desarrollo urbano sustentable a través de la definición del objetivo específico para las ciudades. En este sentido, la creación de capacidades y el intercambio de conocimiento y tecnología son pilares fundamentales para lograr una transición hacia ciudades sustentables e inclusivas. Quisiera en este punto señalar que el mayor desafío que nos espera es la implementación de la Agenda de Desarrollo post-2015 y en este sentido estamos convencidos del rol crucial que tiene Habitat en este aspecto. Habitat 3, entonces, se erige como el punto de partida para que la comunidad internacional renueve los compromisos asumidos en Habitat 2 y dé respuesta a los desafíos habitacionales del futuro a través de la conformación de la nueva agenda urbana global. Si nos enfocamos en nuestras responsabilidades y hacemos de nuestras capacidades una sola mediante la cooperación, podremos estar seguros del éxito de esta reunión. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much. I thank the distinguished representative of Argentina. And now I call on the next speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of Republic of Korea.
Honorable Executive Director, Mr. Juan Cruz, distinguished heads of delegations of Governing Council member states, ladies and gentlemen, I extend my heartfelt congratulations on the successful holding of the 25th session of the UN Habitat Governing Council, taking place in this beautiful city of Nairobi. It is my great pleasure to meet you all at this venue, where we will engage ourselves in important discussions on such issues as improved human settlements and sustainable urban development. Korea achieved one of the most rapid urbanizations in the world, chiefly aided by its remarkable economic growth. Such fast growth was supported by the Korean government's urban policy responses, aptly formulated to fit each phase of Korea's social changes. For example, Korea developed industrial complexes in the 1970s, housing complexes in large cities in the 1990s, and special purpose new towns in 2010. Having said that, owing to some side effects of such rapid urbanization, all the urban cores have been hollowed out and declined. As a result, cities are becoming a place where certain discrimination could be felt by the socially and economically vulnerable groups like the elderly and children. In order to rectify this, we need once again a systematic urban policy response. Thus, the Republic of Korea aspired to rejuvenate urban areas by undertaking comprehensive and diversified regeneration projects in those declined cities, going one step further from the physical approach of the past. For example, the Korean government enacted a special law to support urban regeneration projects efficiently, established a special committee on urban regeneration under the Prime Minister's office, and devised a Beijing framework for national urban regeneration. In this vein, implementation of the following policies will not only shed new light on declined cities, but also provide employment opportunities to the socially vulnerable, creating better economic opportunities towards the citizens. For instance, neighborhood regenerated cities improve infrastructure for better quality of life, such as housing, culture, and welfare, as well as make for sustainable cities where all residents are happy. And economic-based regeneration projects aspire to create economic synergy effects by concentrating on strategic regeneration projects that will have higher restoration effects on local economies. In addition, the government is creating cities well prepared against disasters and designating areas prone to disasters as a disaster prevention district to respond to frequent and large natural disasters caused by climate change. Korea also is working on various policies to improve settlement environment and build sustainable cities through a policy guideline for green infrastructure. These guidelines set out plans to build parks from unused land within urban areas and utilize disused railroad. These efforts will not only raise cities' competitiveness, but also enable improvement of local settlement environment. And fruits of such efforts will be shared by all residents alike, including the socially vulnerable. All countries are faced with global scale issues, such as improvement of living conditions and the promotion of sustainable urban development. These issues need to be dealt with in a concerted manner through the combined efforts of the international community, since they can't be resolved by any one country's efforts alone. I firmly believe that UN Habitat will lead us in the right direction under its excellent leadership in finding solutions to these matters that will prove to be wise. Concluding, I'd like to say that we will put our heads together to pull our wisdom during time we have when we try to cultivate our cities to become more advanced and mature by sharing our policy experience. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Kwon Dae-hol, Director General, Ministry of Land and Transportation, for the presentation. As I do not have any other countries wishing to take the floor today, I am just asking if somebody would like to take the floor. I see Ecuador would like. Please.
Gracias. Gracias, señor presidente. En primer lugar, permítame adherirme a las intervenciones realizadas por las delegaciones de Egipto y México en nombre del Grupo de los 67 más China y el GRULAC respectivamente. En primer lugar, mi delegación quisiera felicitarlo por su elección como presidente, augurándole muchos éxitos en este proceso. y a nuestro hermano uruguayo en la relatoría. En primer lugar, quisiéramos agradecer al gobierno de Kenia por su hospitalidad y por su compromiso con ONU Habitat y con la conferencia Habitat 3, demostrado hoy con el anuncio de Su Excelencia Uhuru Kenyatta, presidente de Kenia, respecto a su generosa donación de $1 millón para UN Habitat y Habitat 3. Mi país, Ecuador, considera que las políticas de hábitat y asentamientos humanos y vivienda expresan la aspiración del Estado de construir la sociedad del buen vivir a través de la regulación pública, tomando en consideración las connotaciones políticas, jurídicas, sociales, económicas, geográficas, medioambientales y culturales en la ciudad. El Gobierno del Ecuador, en su esfuerzo por construir una sociedad más justa y equitativa, ha procurado durante los últimos años poner en marcha un sistema de derechos en materia de hábitat y desarrollo urbano. En principio de guía, su actuación es el derecho a la ciudad, entendido como un conjunto de derechos interrelacionados y vinculados al territorio. Deseo destacar que las acciones hacia una nueva agenda urbana sostenible que esperamos alcanzar en Habitat 3 deben ser asumidas de manera conjunta entre todos los actores, requiriéndose de mayores esfuerzos en los diferentes ámbitos, acciones consensuadas, iniciativas colectivas que agreguen sinergias positivas. Lo requieren imperativamente nuestras ciudades, en especial la gente que más en situación de vulnerabilidad que habita en ellas, tales como las personas con discapacidad, los adultos mayores, nuestros niños, niñas, entre otros. Consideramos que en esta 25 sesión del Consejo de Gobierno es muy propicia para reiterar la importancia de que en la preparación de la tercera conferencia de Hábitat y de la nueva agenda urbana se reconozca el papel de la urbanización sostenible como un motor del desarrollo y las interrelaciones entre las dimensiones sociales, económicas y ambientales de la urbanización sostenible y los asentamientos humanos. En la formulación de políticas, planes y programas a nivel local, nacional e internacional. Señor Presidente, mi delegación reitera el papel fundamental de ONU Habitat en los preparativos para Habitat 3, por lo que reconocemos el establecimiento del equipo de trabajo de Naciones Unidas para este propósito. Para esta, tanto para la PrepCon 2 que se realizó en los días pasados como para esta sesión, hemos visto que la participación de ciertos estados se ha complicado por aspectos presupuestarios, por lo que alentamos a que los Estados miembros y los donantes internacionales y bilaterales a continuar con el apoyo en los preparativos de Habitat 3 y de la PrepCon 3, mediante contribuciones voluntarias al Fondo Fiduciario, con el fin de promover dicha participación de los representantes en todo este proceso. Finalmente, señor Presidente, en nombre del Gobierno del Ecuador y en nuestro papel como país anfitrión, queremos informarles que estamos preparándonos con mucho entusiasmo para recibirlos y desde ya les damos la bienvenida para ello. Muchas gracias.
I thank Jonathan Vieira, distinguished representative of Ecuador, for his presentation. Is there some country who would like to take floor now? If not so, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have come to the end of this afternoon deliberations. We shall resume Monday morning at 10 o'clock sharp. I would like to ask Secretary if there is an announcement for next program. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And distinguished delegates, for tonight at 6:30, I just want to remind you of the graciousness of the government of Kenya to provide us with a reception at 6:30. It is just when you climb up the stairs is the tent you see outside. That is where the reception will be at 6:30. And I understand that they would like to start on time so that they give you some time to go and rest after a long day. Secondly, the government of Kenya has also offered for tomorrow morning and Sunday morning to give you an opportunity of an excursion to both the National Park and the City Walk. You will notice at the exhibition area there is a desk for people to sign in if you have not done so, but you are interested in going on the excursions to the National Park. So I would encourage delegations who wish to go to try to do it today so that they have an idea the number of people that will be going. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. My apologies for coming back again. In order for us to properly reflect the statements you made here today, we'll be grateful if you could send us the statement. If you have them in hard copy, you can put them here. If you have them in soft copy, you can send them to us. But for Monday, it will be good for those who will be speaking on Monday if you could send them to us in advance so that we could share them with the interpreters. Yeah. Thank you, and have a wonderful weekend and a nice evening. Not necessarily in that order. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for the announcement. I would like to thank interpreters for their kind help, and we'll see each other tomorrow on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. President.